welcome back to another episode of me fitting a Saab 9000 2.3 turbo into my 1981 UAZ 452. So before I finalise the engine mount position and where the engine's going to sit in the bay, I need to trial fit a few things, namely the inlet manifold. So B204 and B234 Saab engines come with two types of inlet manifold depending on what car they were fitted in. Sorry, that's just the turbos. The non-turbos got their own manifolds, and we're not interested in them. So this is a 9000 inlet manifold, and the throttle body exits on the back of the engine, so that's where the flywheel goes. And normally people don't want to use these for rear-wheel drive setups because typically you'd have a bulkhead there and all your intercooler and everything is in the nose in the front of the vehicle, so you probably want your throttle body there. Now the other type of inlet manifold, as fitted to 93s and 900s, is this centre throttle body. So I use this on the Scimitar because the engine bay is nice and tall. I run an elbow that comes out, and then I run an intercooler in the nose. The main problem with these though is this distance here, quite big compared to the 9000 manifold. So I've just trial fitted the 900 manifold, the 93 one, the centre throttle body one, because that's the one I thought I was going to go with at first, but it's far too big to fit in the bay. Now I could chop down the runners and re-weld it badly, or more likely give it to someone who can weld aluminium pretty well. Or I could go with the 9000 inlet manifold and have the throttle body at the back of the engine. So I've had a similar situation before when doing the comma. Engine bays on these forward control vans, because you basically sit on top of the engine. The bays are not very wide. They're basically, if you put an engine in a small box, they're like that, right? They're enclosed in every single direction. And it's pretty difficult to get an intercooler in the nose of a van. So with this, I use the 9000 inlet manifold and I run all the boost pipes down the back of the engine. The intercooler on this is I know it's not in a very good position. It's basically in the middle of the van with a fan on it. But vans, as usual, packaging, pretty much biggest issue you'll come up against. This is the manifold off the 9000 in the engine bay. The throttle spindle down there is way too long, but I can chop that down. And also, it's much longer than it needs to be. So I think I'm going to turn it down in the lathe. So what I found there is that the throttle body is too close to the back of the engine bay and the throttle spindle is too close to the side of the engine bay. So I'm going to chop that down and I'm going to turn this down in the lathe so it's shorter, probably about there. Then I can get a tight silicone 90 out of this and then run the boost pipe down the back of the engine. So this is the difference. I've cut down the throttle spindle so it's much smaller. As you can see, it hangs out pretty far on the standard one. And then I've cut mine back so it's much shorter. Then I'm going to use this 2.5 inch, I think, to 2.25 inch adapter. I'm going to cut it back really far and then I'm going to fit it on that. So that should sort my clearance issues. Now that I'm happy with the inlet manifold sitting in the bay, I can finalise the engine mounting position and start tacking them in place. Right, I've just got the mounts tacked in place, so the back plates tacked in place and then the mounts bolted to that. Now to make the section that goes from there to the plates on the side of the engine. Right, I'm not going to lie, that was an absolute bloody nightmare and I didn't really film anything. Bits of box section tacked together whilst it was up in the bay, now to seam weld it. I'm not going to lie, I find this part very difficult. You've got to align the engine central in the bay. Well, I say you've got to, you don't have to, because lots of stuff doesn't have the engine in the middle of the bay. But I want to. So the engine's in the middle, but because everything's sort of hanging in there, what you get is that if you want to move the front to get it lined up, the back will move. You get the back in line, the front moved, and then also there's the height. Okay, this is both mounts completed, triangulated some bits like I said I would. All welding is carried out to a poor standard by myself. So added triangulated bits in, cut holes in the top to be able to get the nut onto the top of the Land Rover mounts. Just cleaned the threads up on the block. Now I'm going to fit them in and see if they take the weight. I say to a poor standard, it's not terrible. Can you imagine the stuff I don't show you? Right, the mounts are bolted in place. I'm gonna go up top and take the mount off. I've got the transmission jack underneath. Hopefully it's not needed. The engine's probably gonna settle a bit, but hopefully not much. Alright, that engine steady up top is slack, so the weight is held by the mounts right now. So happy with that. Barely any movement. These mounts are pretty solid rubber, so there's not much squish in them. The box is still sat central at the back, which is good. Happy days. It's in there. It's solid. I've lent on it to add an extra 60 kilos maybe. Extra weight. Make sure the tacks aren't going to give up overnight, and it hasn't fallen out yet. Okay, it's a new day. The engine is sat on its mount. It's not fallen out overnight, which is alright because I've only put 4 big tack welds on each plate. But the mounts to the engine are complete, other than paint. Happy with that. Held in position, nice and stable. Okay, so this is my plan for the gearbox mount. The Frontera box mounts underneath, right? Which would be fine on something with a lower chassis, but this has quite a high chassis with the box hanging out quite far below. That's how the standard UAZ is, and that's the way this is going to be. So I'm not going to use this mount because I'd have to actually go down first to clear the front prop, and I'd have to add in a bit of strength, which might end up making it lower than this, which I don't want to do. What I'm going to do is basically hang the box off a mount. There's 2 unused M8 threaded bolt holes up here. So I'm going to use them, piece of box section going across the chassis. I'm going to use these to build like a perch, and my Land Rover mounts are going to sit on top of that, and the box section is going to go into it. It's quite a span for some box section, so I'm probably going to use a case bolt each side to basically build like a bit of a strengthener up to it. That's the plan. Should work. Okay, and this is what the monstrosity looks like. 30mm box section, cranked forward each end. It looks all higgledy-piggledy, right? Because the box doesn't sit dead central, because guess what? This box isn't for this engine or this van. So the box is off to a slant slightly. So what I did was get some like 15mm, I think it was, steel, and cut it to shape, and then bolted it to the side of the box, and the box was canted over. I hollowed out the section in the center, mounted these up, or clamped them in place, and then tack welded it. Welded that plate on the back, took it all off, and then finished welding it in the vise. So the center is to accommodate the box being slanted over. It looks wonky, I assure you. It probably is. And this is how it looks. And then the side little perches, had to take a bit of height out of them because they sit quite high up to the chassis. Going to triangulate these. I'm just going to mock it up. Just going to bolt it up to the gearbox now and see how it all looks. Okay, and there it is, bolted up. Happy happy with that. And you guys thought it was wonky. Luckily the whole van is.
Jesus Christ.
Okay, here it is, tacked in place. Now to weld it up fully. Okay, this is how it all looks. I've drilled these out to 12mm, and what I'm going to do is bolt this all up to the van now, and then I'm going to clamp these in position, and I'm going to lower the ramp down, check the pinion angle. I've checked it previously and I was close, but now it's just been held up with ratchet straps, so I'm going to check it again. And then once I'm happy where these are positioned and the back of the box is at the right height, I'm going to transfer the bolt holes through to the chassis. Mr. Step, going to triangulate the brackets which hold the mounts to the chassis, and then I'm going to bolt it all in. Does it all still fit? Alright, load testing the gearbox mount. All right. Okay, there it is, all sat on its wheels, and the engine looking very at home, sat on its mounts, nice and solid, plenty of room to run boost pipes, charge cooler, radiator pipes, etc, etc. So that's looking good. I think it looks right at home there. I will be honest, I was quite worried about ground clearance. I'm not used to seeing a gearbox hang below a chassis on a vehicle. So I went and measured a few vehicles which are parked around here. There's a series with the smaller tyres on it. I think they're 7-inch tyres, I'm not too sure. And that had 240mm ground clearance, quite low. And then there's a Defender around here, and I measured that 400mm below. And this is below the gearbox. 400mm from the gearbox cross member to the floor. So I've measured this, and it's coming in at 360mm, which is ample. And once you look underneath, you can see there's plenty of room. Right, I'm going to call it here for this episode. Thanks for watching, and catch me next time where the progress continues on my Saab turbo powered UAZ.